Remember just the other day I was in the sunshine in my t-shirt sitting up on a mountain? Well, look at this. Yeah, just like the weather. Flip-flop, hot, cold, sunshine, snow. This is exactly what this virus is doing to our community and to our lives. One day, things are sailing along. And the next day, I'm amazed at how often God's Word, every time you open it, you read it, you meditate on it, it speaks exactly to what is needed at the time, in the moment. More than any other time in recent history, it seems that we are in need of God's wisdom, to seek it, to listen for Him to speak. And God's Word, to me, I am realizing more and more, always arrives right on time. And I've been led to go to Ecclesiastes chapter 3. It begins like this. There's a season for every activity under heaven. There is a time for everything. Even COVID-19? The text says there's a season for every activity and a time for everything. And then he goes on and gives all kinds of contrasts. A time to be born and a time to die. We're well aware that people are dying today around the world from this virus. It's a heightened awareness for us. And it's really happening. And yet at the same time, there are those who are being born. A time to plant and a time to uproot. This seems like a great time to plant kindness and goodness and all those things of the fruit of God's Spirit, and to just uproot the selfishness in our life. It's a time to tear down and a time to build up. A time to tear and a time to mend and heal. It seems to me, too, that this is a time where our idols of our culture are being torn down. And it's a time to mend and to heal the wounds of division that have been a big part of our culture, and to actually build one another up. It's a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to mourn and a time to dance. It seems like we know what time it is now. We're longing for the day to dance and to have a full, hearty laugh, but it seems that we're in a time of weeping and mourning for the brokenness of the world, for ourselves. It's a time for silence and a time to speak. It seems more than ever that now is a time for silence. We should lean into it, because it's a time for listening, and when we are quiet without all of our words and the pace of life in some ways slows down, we might be able to hear God speaking more. Talk about God's word arriving right on time. It actually says, with these contrasts, it says there's a time for embracing and a time for not embracing. Talk about relevant. Man, I am sick of looking out my picture window. I just want to hug somebody.
Hug me.
The text goes on to say there's a time to love and a time to hate, a time for war and a time for peace. And I think we know what time it is now. And then God gives a promise. He says there's a time and a season for everything. That means everything, which says that God is somehow Lord and sovereign over all of it, even though we can't figure it out. The hows and the whys to all of our questions. And then he makes a bunch of contrasts. A time for this and a time for that. And it seems we just need to discern what time it is right now. What does this time call for in response as followers of Jesus? The text goes on then to give an incredible promise. He has made everything beautiful in its time. Everything is the word that's used again. That takes an incredible amount of trust and faith. And then there's some incredible wisdom that follows right after that about what are we to do when we can recognize what time it is. And the wisdom is just amazing again. It goes on to read in verse 12, I know there is nothing better for people than to be content, to be blessed, and to do good while they live. Sounds simple. And actually, it really is. Today is filled like any other day, and maybe more pointedly now in the midst of all of this isolation, the disruption, the discouragement, to do good. God makes everything beautiful in its time. No one can fathom what God has done from beginning to end. I know that there is nothing better for people than to do good while they live. I know that everything God does will endure forever. Nothing can be added to it, nothing taken from it. God does this. God is this so that people will revere him. I wonder with lots of questions as you do, what is God doing during this time? But I think he's asking us to listen, to know what time it is, to understand that he makes everything beautiful in his time, and that in the meantime, he calls us to be busy doing good. What a difference 3 days makes. The snow is gone. The sun is out. And look, the promise of spring.